Right, good morning everybody, and welcome to my first artist talk. This is quite an occasion really, because it's really the first time I've had the opportunity to formally share the work that I've done over the last 6 months or so. But I think the other part of this is, of course, it's kind of almost the end of the exhibition that's on currently, which is the alumni of the Learning Connexion got together. So there's about 10 artists, I think it is, who've all got their work on display here. So yeah, my work is here obviously, but there's some other brilliant talent on offer. So I do encourage you, if you get a chance, just to have a wander around at the end of this talk and just sort of appreciate some of the brilliance that is here and that lives locally in the heart. So yeah, for me, obviously this is an opportunity to, as I mentioned, share my work. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. Basically we've got around 5 topics to cover off, and I'll whiz through this reasonably quickly. The main part of this for me is actually just to give you a sense of some of the themes that have inspired me in the work. I'll talk about some of the artists that I've kind of really come across along the way who've also been inspirational. My art making practice, which is a little bit different, I think, but you might find that interesting. Some of the artwork, of course, that I've produced, and then some of the tips that I've found, some of the things that actually help me keep going when it's pretty tough, either motivation or just finding time, or some of the barriers that we come across. So in terms of inspirational themes, many of you may know, many of you may not know, but basically Greek mythology is a topic and a kind of an aspect of history that I love. And so in my studies at the Learning Connexion, which I did level 5, a New Zealand Diploma in Creativity, I did that from about 2018 to 2020. And so some of the work that I'm showing now is actually the work that I produced in my time studying. Now the Labyrinth, many may be aware of it, it's basically a kind of a metaphor for life's journey, and I believe it's the most beautiful symbol. I've actually studied it in quite a bit of depth artistically, so I've just got 3 pieces here, which are kind of a summary of all of the other labyrinths that I've formed and produced over the last couple of years. I think the thing with the Labyrinth for me is what it's taught me is actually, yes, it's a symbol and a metaphor for life's journey, but it's also a symbol for the creative journey that we all follow, and the artistic pursuits that we look to go after. And so I just love the concept of actually starting on the outside of the labyrinth, and for me it's about the beginning of a new piece of work, a new piece of art, and the joy and the wonder that I experience when I start to produce and start to create. So very much moving from the outside of the labyrinth to its centre. I think the other thing with the labyrinth, which is so powerful, I believe, is it is very much about the journey as well as the destination. I know that sounds quite cliched and stuff, but it's actually true. And I certainly have learnt that through my art, is actually being aware of what's going on around me as I'm producing is very, very powerful and a great input into the work itself. So it's not about detaching from the real world, it's actually about living it and being part of it. And that's a massive input and influence on the work itself. So yeah, I've got these 3 labyrinths. So the one on your left-hand side is basically, it's a clay finger labyrinth. So you actually follow the path of the labyrinth with your finger, made out of clay and burnt umber oxide. The one in the middle is actually, it's a reclaimed slab of concrete from the banks of the Hutt River. So I just went down there and I thought about the concept of repurposing existing stones and trying to honour the stone and create some form of art. So that's where I overlaid the 7-circuit labyrinth on the top with paint. And then the final one on the right-hand side is actually, again, a reclaimed stone, river stone, but I just felt there was something going on in terms of the circular pattern of the labyrinth and the shape of the stone itself, and I really loved just working with both those aspects. So yeah, Greek mythology, big theme, and I'd encourage anybody to do a bit more research on Greek mythology if you're into it, because there's some really great messages in it, and there's some great lessons to be learned. Next slide, thank you. So as part of this whole journey and discovery around Greek mythology, I did come across the figure and the character called the Minotaur. And many people may be aware of the Minotaur, many people may not be aware of him, but basically he's pretty much an outcast, so he's a half-breed. He's half bull, half human. And because of his monstrous form, because of his ugliness, and because of the fact he's different, he was actually banished to the centre of the labyrinth and left there to die, basically. So with my studies of the Minotaur, I've really started to work with the concept of treating this creature as something of beauty. And so what you see here are a couple of prints that I actually produced. Because I'm a distance delivery student, I don't go on site to art school that often, if at all really. And so when it comes to printing, most of it I do at home. So these prints, they're both the head of the Minotaur, or you could say it's a bull, the head of the Minotaur, in my mind, was cut out of lino block, so just soft block. And the printing press I had at home was the back of a soup spoon. So all of the pressure that I could apply and bring to bear was just through my arm and the spoon. And so I really enjoyed the concept of just exploring this character. And I'll talk about him in a bit more detail shortly, but yeah, I do find the Minotaur fascinating actually. And so hence the topic of my speech is actually the Minotaur and me, because I've developed a bit of a relationship with this particular figure, and I'll talk about it in a second. Next slide, thank you. So now some inspirational artists, and I just thought it would be a great opportunity to share with you some of the artists that I've found have inspired me in the work I've done so far. The first one is my dad. So you won't find him online. You won't see any of his work anywhere in galleries. It's pretty much at home, both my brother's house and my house. I think the great thing about this, and one of the reasons why I'm just so honoured to share it, is basically Dad was a massive figure in my life artistically. Unfortunately, he was a real perfectionist, so when I was a kid growing up and going through school, he was really quite controlling of my art and just wanted it to be perfect, which was great for him, but didn't really help me in terms of my own creativity. So I guess I did feel a sense of being trapped, and it could relate to the Minotaur actually for a long while. So I think it was around the end of my secondary schooling at Hupley High School where I just left art for 35 years, so a long time, just abandoned it. But then came back, and actually I'm really pleased I did, because it's been quite wondrous what I've found since I've returned. I think the thing with Dad, and why I really love showing this, is actually, you know, he did a lot of caricatures, he did a lot of landscape painting, but I think his portraits are actually quite superb, and I love portraits too. So the one in the middle is actually somebody that I think he worked with, but he just used this cubist style, which I think is really cool. Picasso inspired potentially, I don't know, but yeah, just a nice, very stylised figure. And then the one on the right is actually a beautiful Māori chief, and it's part of a series of Māori chiefs, I guess, that Dad produced. I don't know exactly who the chief is, and I'd love to know, but I guess you can see the skill in this in terms of the tone, the colour, and obviously the respect of the subject. So just an example, I guess, of some of Dad's work, and certainly he was a massive inspiration and he continues to be. What I was thinking about doing, because he's a bit of an unknown, I guess, in artistic circles, so I'll definitely be looking to post more of his work on Instagram just to share it, because I feel good about that, and I feel a sense of, I guess, you know, respect to him and his work, so that's what I'm planning to do further down the track. Another inspirational artist, many of you know this guy, so Michelangelo Bonarotti, you know, colossus really in terms of all things artistic. For me, we visited the Sistine Chapel. I'm sure many people in the room have been there too. I was just completely inspired and just gobsmacked with the beauty and the scale of it. So that was in the late 90s. We came back and I never really kind of thought much about Michelangelo, but when I started studying back at the Learning Connexion, then I really started to connect with this guy and the work he was doing. So I've got two pieces to show you. One is I just did a small detail of the Pieta. And I think the Pieta is absolutely beautiful. So it's Mary holding the dead Jesus in her arms. And I just love the emotion that he's able to convey and the sense of kind of sadness, I think, that comes through. I think the thing with this, you know, I had to keep thinking that, God, he made this out of marble. You know, it's one slab of marble that he just carved, and that's what he produced. And, you know, it's just incredible, really, and quite fantastic. So my drawing was just a charcoal drawing that I did of it, and it's quite dark. So you'll see my style has changed a lot. But yeah, at that time I was just trying to, I guess, wrestle with dark and light, so the real basics of drawing. And so yeah, that was sort of the first time I'd sort of connected with Michelangelo's work. And then the next slide is actually, of course, the wondrous David. Yeah, again, in terms of perfection, there's nothing quite like it. In terms of proportion, in terms of beauty, I don't mean my piece, by the way. I mean the original. But yeah, I mean, I love this sculpture. I've never seen it. I'd love to see it, and if anyone's seen it, I'm sure you'd be suitably impressed. So it's just quite fantastic, I think. I love the idea of this David being pre-throwing of the stone, so not when he'd actually kind of completed the job and was holding Goliath's head cut off, and above his own head. I kind of like the concept of it being pre-battle, and the kind of that sense of anticipation that comes through. So that was certainly my challenge to try and create. One of the things with my painting, so this was done again when I was studying at art school, I think I really enjoyed the use of colour. I mean, it's pretty soft and subtle, and it's definitely inspired by the tutor who I had at the time, who was Justine Turnbull, and she's absolutely brilliant, and just helped me kind of, I guess, come to grips with a more expressive style, for me, more expressive style. But yeah, so that was another inspirational artist that I've certainly enjoyed. The next one, though, is one that perhaps some people may be aware of from the Learning Connection. So Billy Wilson is, as I believe, a true inspiration. He was my mentor when I was studying at the Learning Connection, and it's funny with I think in art, it's great to have a mentor. It's a very special relationship. I felt very close to him in terms of his support of what I was doing, his understanding of what I was trying to achieve. It was absolutely brilliant. And so with Billy, there were times when I'm sure he was ripping his hair out, because we both get quite consumed with our work, which is a very common failing, I'm sure, of many artists. But yeah, we were able to kind of check each other, which was nice, and keep each other honest as we went through this whole process. But the reason why I've got Billy here is actually he's currently working on a new piece for the Parkin Awards, so he'll be submitting that if he hasn't already submitted it. And I just want to wish him all the very best, because I think he is incredibly gifted, but he's not just an artist, he is a mentor and inspiration at the same time. The couple of works I've got that I did with Billy, I just wanted to share because they're really unusual, but actually very much sum up us. So the one on the left is my travelling egg. So for those who've studied it, the Learning Connection, the travelling egg is a big deal. You've got to basically you've got to make a piece of art featuring a raw egg, and then you have to get it couriered from your house, or in my case from Eastbourne, to the Learning Connection in Pieta without the egg breaking. So in this one, I was really thinking about obviously the transportation side of it, but also the art in terms of what could I do to kind of honour the egg. So this is very much kind of a bit of a paying tribute to the egg. I was inspired by Salvador Dali's, he's got a royal heart, which is like an encrusted heart, which I love. So anyway, it was partly, that had an influence, I think. But yeah, so the egg arrived at Learning Connection fully intact. But the great thing for me was actually the conversation that I had with Billy about that and about the work. It was just ridiculous. Like, we spent probably an hour talking about an egg, for goodness sake. But it was just so brilliant. And he just saw so many different angles on it. It was just so enjoyable, which was amazing. The other piece I've got is one of the lino cut prints that I did when I was working with Billy. And this was a really important piece for me, because one of the things I started to feel with Billy was just a sense of freedom. And so again, my whole Greek mythology kind of interest came to life through Icarus. So the Icarus character I love. The concept of, I'm sure many people know, the guy whose dad made some wings out of feathers and wax to help him fly out of the labyrinth to freedom. Unfortunately, you probably know the moral of the story. He ignored his father's advice, flew too close to the sun, and the wings melted and he collapsed to the ground and died. But the thing for me, and why I love this piece, is there's kind of a bit of Billy's encouragement in this, in a sense of just go for it. The unleashed kind of, the sense of freedom and just exploration that came with it. And again, with Billy, we talked about this particular piece for probably about an hour as well, but it was just so much fun to have the time to just enjoy this and to interpret it. And like I say, this is very much a reflection of Billy's influence on me and my art. Right, so into some more recent things. In terms of the topic and the collection that I've got, I think one of the things that I learned, because I finished at the Learning Connection in July last year, and then had this sort of 6-month stint where I basically lost my job. And so in the interest of earning money for my family and just literally keeping some sort of income, I turned to painting and decorating. Now, I'm not a painter or decorator at all, not at all. And I would have thought, if I was a painter, I love drawing, would have thought there's some sort of translation from art to painting and decorating, but unfortunately that was absolutely not the case. And so I ran around like a madman for 6 months and just tried to, do what I was told to do, because I was effectively an apprentice on the job. But the reason why I'm telling you this is that actually that was 6 months without art. And yeah, that was probably one of the toughest 6 months that I've ever experienced. physically it was exhausting, and so I had no energy for art, and really, really missed it. So that took me until about January this year, and then basically from January onwards actually it was more like late last year, I changed jobs, so I was back in an office working with these lovely ladies from New Zealand Home Loans. So I was back in an office, great, not on a building site, not running around painting and trying to, do what I had to do. That enabled me to get back into art, and that was really quite a turning point. And I guess one of the things that I will start to talk a little bit more about is just the practice of art and the habit of art, and how I've been able to form it. So the whole Good Fortune Coffee, the whole Seashore Cabaret connection, that's really come about because I had this thing where I basically would schedule an hour every weekday from 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 to draw. And so I would actually also be at Seashore Cabaret drinking their filter coffee, which is great. So it's $6 for a bottomless filter coffee. It's phenomenal, and incredible value. But also, it gave me the ability to stay for an hour and actually draw. So all the works you'll see now are from Seashore Cabaret and from the time that I spent there. I think the other thing about it is, when I talked about when days are dark, well, actually, I guess the beauty of this is that I found that I can do art actually in the context of a very busy life and working full time. So the days aren't so dark anymore, which is great. But they can always be lighter, and there's always opportunities for more enjoyment and stuff. And that's certainly what I'm going to look at and what I'll talk to you about shortly. What I was going to do though, we were going to have a prize draw at the end. So I'll just hand out my business card, and then we're going to have some goodies that Seashore Cabaret and Good Fortune Coffee Company have kindly provided. So they kind of supported me really well throughout, like I say, the last 6 months of drinking their coffee, and art making. But also they wanted to support this today, which is quite fantastic. I'm really grateful. Okay, so this is sort of an interesting one, and I think it's quite a shift. And what I've tried to do is just sort of summarise the things in my art that have been really important to my development. And I think it's quite interesting because this is quite different to where I was when I was studying at the Learning Connexion. So I think with this, it's just a nice summary, I guess, of all the things that come together for me to make magic, in effect, which is the artworks that you'll see. So the first thing for me is around technique, and I think that's still a crucial factor, the craft, whether it's drawing, whether it's painting, whether it's printmaking, whatever that might be. But I always think there's more to learn, more to explore through the craft, through the art, the process of the art. I think that's really, really important. The other thing though for me is something that I've learned more recently is actually I really am drawn to subject matter that's sort of quite inspiring, or that sort of connects to me in my life in some shape or form. But it's always artistic subject matter. So you'll see a lot of the reference I've used has been either sculpture, classical sculpture, or it's been gravestones. I just find there's something there for me. But basically there's an artistic subject at play here, and it's often sculpture, which I'm trying to sort of just connect with. And the final thing was the life event. So this is a new part of it, and I really like this aspect of art making does not happen in isolation, or at least it doesn't for me. So if I can somehow connect with something that's happened in my life and channel it through the art, something amazing happens. And the life event, it doesn't have to be something major. I mean, it can be something very simple. I mean, Mother's Day was a big trigger for me in terms of a work that I dedicated to my mum. So, there's different ways that these events can occur, but having an awareness of them, I think, is really important. And it can actually change the work. If you feel very strongly about it, it can definitely change the work. Sophie, my daughter, is here now, and I did tell the story of a portrait of Sophie and her sister Emily that I tried to draw during this time that I was at Seashore Cabaret drinking bucket loads of filter coffee. But the portrait was of the two girls together, and because Sophie has moved to Auckland and they're no longer together, Emily lives in Wellington. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't finish it. Couldn't progress it. So there was an example actually of the life event that was just so consuming that I just really couldn't grapple with it through art or through life generally, but through art in particular. So that's on the back burner. I may come back to it though, but at the moment you'll see I've kind of found some other life events that have triggered a connection with new subject matter and new techniques. So, all I was thinking, if you're an artist yourself and you wanted to perhaps consider your work in the context of what's happening in your life, I think some of those things are quite useful. Life events, subjects that are artistically inspiring, and then obviously the work, the craft. So some work. So what I've got is basically, there's 3 pieces here which are from what I call Human Frailty, which is a collection of pencil drawings that I've got over on display outside the Mayor's office. And the thing with this is that I guess I really wanted to show you the original subject and then the drawing. And I guess the thing for me is it does show, I guess, perhaps a difference for me in terms of how I've interpreted it. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously these are gravestones, so they're not everybody's cup of tea in terms of a subject, and I fully appreciate that. I guess in this particular case, so I've got 3 that I'll talk to you about. First, the one called Angel of Darkness is actually, I think it's the Disbury Angel, I think it is anyway. It's a gravestone in the UK. And basically the theory of this one is that it's decayed obviously, but the gravestone itself weeps black tears. And I came across this subject when I was doing a Wednesday night class with Kieran, who was brilliant as a tutor at the Learning Connexion. And the thing with it is that it really, part of it was obviously it's a gravestone, and it kind of symbolises certainly a different phase of life or death for that matter. But I think the thing that triggered for me really was just more the whole idea of impermanence and the fact that actually, we aren't here forever, so we might as well make the best of it and the best of the life that we lead. I think it's strange that a statue like this could kind of create such a response, but I think it's a nice thing in terms of it just forced me to start making more art, and it was definitely a catalyst for a sense of time running out, so having to act, if you like. So that's the Angel of Darkness. There's a few angels that you'll see now. So the Angel of Sorrow. The thing with this one is it's from a gravestone in Montmartre in Paris, and there's some beautiful gravestones right throughout Europe, of course. But in this one in particular, really did move me considerably. I think with this one, it's partly the subject and the decayed form of the gravestone, but it's also, I guess, a major life event where my Uncle Snow passed away at the same time I was drawing this. So I was obviously dealing with the loss of Uncle Snow, who was the last of my mum and dad's sort of brothers and sisters, if you like. So the last connection that I had to that sort of part of the family. So when he passed, it was very, very sad, and he was a great guy as well. So I was just working with obviously the feeling of sadness and loss. The thing that's perhaps most people have commented on with this is actually there's sort of this whole anatomical aspect to my drawing. You can see it a bit in the actual work in the original piece, but that whole the anatomy and the sinews of the neck. There's some stuff that I started to explore which I found quite interesting. But anyway, as a process and a way to, I guess, just express a particular feeling, which unfortunately wasn't that positive, but it was an important thing to do, and I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to explore this particular subject, and obviously pay my respects to Uncle Snow as I was doing this. The third angel, oh no, we've got a creature of the wild now. Okay, cool. So yeah, basically this one's it's not a gravestone. So this is a chap called Salinas. So Salinas is actually a Greek god, and again, I obviously am interested in Greek mythology big time. But Salinas had a relationship. He was the foster father of Dionysus, who was the god of wine. Anyway, this particular sculpture I've just focused it on the dad, or the foster father. He's actually looking at his son. He's holding his son in his arms in this particular piece. I haven't drawn that. But the thing that really occurred to me as I was doing this is the relationship between father and son. And actually it's interesting, but I was writing my speech for the graduation at the Learning Connexion at the same time I was drawing this, and all my sort of, I guess, thoughts around Dad and his influence on my life was coming through. So actually as I was drawing this I was thinking of him. But the great thing that started to occur as well is just I had more of a sense of his impact, but also his guidance too. And it was strange, but actually really started to help me just accept that there's this other sort of force at play, which is his sort of, his legacy. And the moment that I started to respect that and looked to really honour it through my work, just changed, and I felt so much more comfortable, I guess, in terms of where I was at. So yeah, this is basically the last piece that's on display over at outside the Mayor's office, and literally as a tribute to my father. So if we go to the next slide, that's the collection. If you get a chance to see it, if you want to have a wander over, please feel free. Campbell Barry has been awesomely supportive of the Learning Connection and of the arts community, and I'm really honoured to be outside his office. So yeah, I think this is such a cool initiative for all of us, really. Okay, so I might just have a quick drink because this is where it starts to get quite emotional. Right, so with Angel of Mercy, I think, so these are the 4 works now that are on display here, and I wanted to really just explain to you, I guess, the works themselves, but also what influenced me, but also artistically what I was trying to do. So this first piece is actually, it's a tribute to my mum. I think with this one, as I mentioned, I was doing some drawing around Mother's Day and thinking a lot about her. And I really kind of like the concept of the Angel of Mercy, the person in your life who just gives you this unconditional love, and who is kind and caring, supportive, nurturing. You know, and I think for me, I kind of accept that that's the role that Mum played, which was quite brilliant. But I also think that we all need some sort of Angel of Mercy in our lives. I think we all need somebody who is that caring figure. Someone, it may not be your mum, maybe just someone generally who's got that your best interests at heart, and who doesn't judge, who doesn't accept, just kind of just supports, really. So I'm not sure the actual gravestone, it's another gravestone, but I'm not sure where it is exactly. I think it's in the UK somewhere. But my interpretation of it is I really challenged myself to channel my love of Mum through the work. So this particular piece is actually soft as, it's just so soft. And that's because that's how I felt. And you'll find a lot of the marks and stuff, they're just so subtle. And that's only because I was feeling this love for her. And I think the thing with it, which I'm really quite amazed at actually, is, in terms of the marks, they're soft, yes, but there's kind of almost, I've tried to be as minimalist and kind of, held back as I possibly could, out of respect for her. So, yeah, that's the first piece that you'll see on the far left, and this is also a tribute to my mum. So, yeah, be very grateful if you want to have a look at this at the end of the talk. So the next one is the Angel of Death. So there's been a few angels, we've covered a few. This is completely different now. So the interesting thing with this particular subject is it is the Angel of Death. It's outside a cemetery, the Azul Cemetery in Argentina, and the figure itself is 30 feet high. It's absolutely massive. This statue is ginormous. But the cool thing about it is it was actually made by an Argentinian Art Deco architect. So not an artist, or an artist in the strictest sense. So more of an architect. And the work I love, actually. It's basically chiseled, massively chiseled, and you can see, certainly in the work that I've used as the reference, it's very balanced, it's very structured, and so to draw this was actually incredible. I loved it. It was so much fun because of the structured nature of it. I didn't use a ruler, it was just freehand, but I kind of loved the balance of it all, really, and it felt quite different. So in some respects, this wasn't really about a life event or even drawing per se. It was about the subject matter, the artistic subject matter, which I think is absolutely brilliant. And so this style of work, I definitely want to pursue further. So basically, in lockdown last year, I did a whole lot of geometric paintings. I haven't got them here, but they were very much Labyrinth inspired, but highly geometric. And I think now that I've gone into portraits in this style, I'll probably go back actually and revisit through painting, because I think it's something for me that's actually really interesting and enjoyable. So yeah, that'll be probably the next iteration of the Angel of Death. Boy. So Boy is the third drawing up here on the wall. This one is of Antinos, who is actually another Greek god. I think he was the lover of Hadrian back in Greek mythology. The thing that I love about this one is, so the figure, he died when he was age 19. I think he drowned in the Nile, apparently. So not a great way to go. But anyway, that was the the story as it went. But this particular bronze sculpture I just think is fantastic. I think it kind of bridges between being childlike and being godlike. I just like that sort of the whole space that it's in terms of just, is it a god, is it a child, what really is it? So for me, I think the beauty of that is quite remarkable. In terms of my interpretation, I think one of the things that really struck me with this, when I was painting and decorating, I buggered my shoulder, so really not good actually. But the reason I'm telling you that is actually it sort of really started to hurt around the time I was drawing this. And so it's getting better now, which is good. But the thing is, I guess, I was sort of almost yearning for being a child again, and the whole life of no pain, no aches, no injuries, just fun and simplicity and joy. So I guess there's probably a bit of nostalgia in this as well, to be fair. But yeah, I really was interested in the eyes too. So in my drawing, I'm curious about what he's looking at, and I was thinking about that too. Looking into the future, maybe, I'm not sure. But the principle of honouring the original work through this drawing, I really enjoy. And so, like I say, he's on display. I've simply called it Boy, but it's very much a tribute, I guess, to lost childhood and that innocence that perhaps sometimes we do yearn for. So, the last piece in my collection is the Standing Minotaur. Now, he's on the far right, up here. The thing with the Minotaur is, as I mentioned, there is very much this sort of connection that I have with Greek mythology. I love the character because he is so abandoned and so lonely. And I felt that way for many years myself, being away from art. But the thing is, though, I guess, there's probably an element of me respecting this character and actually just accepting it. That people do, you do stuff in your lives that perhaps is not popular, that can be, unpleasant, whatever the case may be. But, there's never a strong case to isolate somebody for them doing that, for that reason. So I'm very much in tune with the principle of a figure who is abandoned and lost, trying to find him and respecting the beauty and the beast. So the original bronze sculpture was done by Pieta. Now she's the most phenomenal artist I've ever come across in terms of her sculpture. It's absolutely beautiful. She has this style, this whimsical style, which I think is quite superb. And she's done a whole series of minotaurs. So of course I'm going to like her work, aren't I? Because there's definitely a connection there. But I think her work is absolutely brilliant. So often her standing minotaurs are life-size, and she'll show them reading or doing stuff in everyday life, which is just, I think, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So the original piece that I've used as my subject was called the Standing Minotaur. But what was quite cool about this one, so I started the drawing about a year ago, and then I just left it because I couldn't finish it, didn't feel like it was the right thing to do at the time. So I came back to this actually around my birthday of this year, which is April, and literally just found that I had this much stronger connection with the work, and I started to change it though. So I did apply some cosmetic surgery to the Minotaur just to kind of reshape him a little bit. And actually moved his eye, which I think helped it. But the bigger thing for me was actually just the removal of dark, to actually kind of almost let the light come through. So I just used a rubber and literally just tore back all the shade and all the darkness. And yeah, it sort of changed the character quite dramatically. And I'm really pleased with the sort of empathy I've got for this particular figure. I think the other cool thing about this is, so when I've got this habit of actually posting my work on Instagram once a week if I can do it. It's a nice thing to aim for at least. But the byproduct and the benefit of that is actually the sharing of it, and the feedback is quite superb. And there's people in the room who are just so supportive. I think it's absolutely incredible. But yeah, so I tagged Beth Carter Artist in my drawing. And it's kind of like, as an artist, to get recognition from someone who is like this was powerful. And she came back straight away and actually congratulated me on the drawing and just said how beautiful it was. And I think for me to get that sort of praise is just quite phenomenal. And yeah, so I guess the Minotaur is definitely a character that I'm pretty passionate about. Whether I continue on with the theme, I'm not sure. He's always going to be in the mix, I think, in some way. But we'll probably look to do other forms of mythology in time. So, some tips. Yeah, so basically, I think I just thought it'd be quite useful, now we've been through the collection, just to sort of summarise some of the stuff that actually, I guess, has worked for me in the last 6 months. One of the things that I guess is really important, I believe, is actually to front up to the page and do the work. And I know that sounds really simple, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on the way you look at it, but when we're busy, the last thing perhaps you can have time for is to be artistic or to be creative. I think the reality is I used to schedule that hour a day. I call it a sacred hour, as I mentioned, but it just became the thing I did from 7 till 8 on a weekday. And so I fronted up, and I think for me it's been so kind of liberating, really. And so I'm fortunate now I'm able to actually go back to do more art studies. So as I said, I've completed level 5 at the Learning Connexion, but I'm now able to go back and do level 6, which is a brilliant opportunity for me. I've actually started this week on that. But the thing is that a lot of the principles that I put in play in terms of structure, in terms of dedicating the time, I'll definitely keep in the mix, because I think it's definitely worked. The other thing is adapting your approach. So one thing I think that I guess I found is that all I had pretty much was an hour a day. So what was I going to do if I had a visual diary, a pencil and a rubber? So I just drew, and that was the approach I took. I mean, I've done painting and printmaking as well in the past, but this is kind of what worked for me, and it was just a reflection of the time I had, and obviously the environment as well. So I just think it's good to be open to adapting. I think with pencil drawing though, so these two figures, Yvonne might have gone, but actually one of them is a very close friend, John, who I did his portrait a few months ago now, and I'm not massively experienced in portraits per se at all, but I did this for John. He was unwell, and I was really quite grateful to start to appreciate the impact that my art can have. And when I went around to John's house, he wasn't actually able to see me at the time, but his wife met me, and I gave his wife a framed picture of John, and she was in tears. She just said, "Oh, you're the artist, aren't you? That's absolutely so wonderful." And I just gave her the piece, but it was a nice thing to be able to do, and it's just funny how these things can unfold, and funny how simple pencil drawing, simple art in any shape or form can actually have a significant impact on the people in our lives. Embracing your style, I think that's quite an interesting one actually. I think, and there is definitely an element of it evolving for me. So it's never set in stone. Excuse the pun, but it's not set in stone. It's very much a kind of fluid thing. I think with the style I've got now, with a lot of the softness and the subtlety of the drawing, I'll be really interested to see where that goes in terms of painting, because I found that actually I'm almost with a pencil just using it like a brush really. It's just very, very feather-like touch, very soft. But when I've started painting again, a similar thing is happening. So it's quite interesting, and it'll be I think it'd be curious to see how my work does evolve and how the style that I use does evolve. But the mere fact that I've sort of got these other aspects, whether it's the subject, whether it's a life event, or whether it's just the craft, those things I'll always be thinking about when I'm doing my work. The other portrait is actually of a guy called Will Pike, who was a student. I think he's still a student at the Learning Connexion. Anyway, Will and I have got a very close relationship. I did this portrait for him at a time when he was having, I guess, some challenges, and actually I've got it at home. I must frame it and give it to him, but I think I just loved the whole idea of drawing somebody, and then obviously I shared a photo of it, but I haven't given him the actual piece, but I will. Excuse the pun there as well. But yeah, it's basically just a nice way to share the work, and to hopefully help others. So, yeah, we're getting to the end now. These photographs were taken at home, and I must give credit to my daughter Emily. Sophie's great with photography as well, but Emily's brilliant, so she's taken all these shots. But basically, I think probably what I've realised more than anything else, and the reason why I called this the Minotaur in me is actually to come full circle. I think accepting that there is a Minotaur within all of us is actually a really good place to start. And a Minotaur, I mean in the sense of a part of you that's abandoned or that's been left alone for so long. And if you can find it and tap into it, actually amazing things can happen. And I think in the case of this particular piece, so it kind of does mark, I guess, the acceptance that I have of the Minotaur in me. And so in effect, I am the Minotaur. And so that work is very much a symbol of that sort of realisation, I guess, that I've had. But I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to share my story and my work with you guys today. It's been fantastic. And so what we've got now is just a quick giveaway. So what I need to do though is hand out my business cards. Not that you have to keep the card, by the way, but it's just a way that I can then find 3 people in the room who will receive a prize from Seashore Cabaret and Good Fortune Coffee. So I'll give you my business cards. So what we've got is a kilogram of firecracker plunger coffee. So that's pretty serious. That's heavy duty. It's over there, sorry, yeah. So basically that's obviously a bag of the Good Fortune Company's finest. I think that's the blend they use in their, I'm not trying to do a promotion here, but I think it's the blend they use in their bottomless cups, so I'd recommend it, by the way. There's also a $10 gift card and there's a glass keep cup. I think with this particular part of it, at the end of the day, it's amazing to see the support that we as artists get from the community, and in this case a business, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So, has everybody got a business card? Not yet. Okay. Oh, that's all right. There is actually on a business card my Instagram address, or handle, whatever you call it. But anyway, that's okay. One thing I was going to say with the work that I'll be doing in the future, so I'll definitely share more of this on Instagram for those that want to find out more. I think the thing is that, I guess I've had to become pretty comfortable with sharing my work, and that's been quite a journey, to be fair. So I'm now at that stage, and even just to be able to stand here and talk to you about it is quite a big step. So thank you for being so supportive, and thank you for just making the effort to be here. I'll never forget it, so I'm really grateful. Okay, so